get on the ground! Now! Drop the weapon and get on the ground!
Officer, this is my house. That's a staple gun. I'm the homeowner.
Hands up! Don't argue with me!
My hands are up. I'm complying. You're pointing a gun at an unarmed man on his own driveway.
On your knees! Now!
Get on the ground. Now. Drop the weapon and get on the ground. The command shattered the peace of a quiet Saturday afternoon in one of Atlanta's most prestigious suburbs. It wasn't shouted by a criminal. It was shouted by a police officer, weapon drawn leveled at the chest of a man who was standing in his own driveway holding a roll of gold crepe paper and a heavy-duty staple gun. The man was Marcus Thorne. He wasn't a burglar. He wasn't a vandal. He was the chief deputy district attorney for the city, a man who had spent 25 years putting dangerous criminals behind bars and upholding the law with an iron fist. But none of that mattered right now, because to the officer looking down the barrel of a Glock 17 and to the neighbor watching smugly from the edge of the lawn, Marcus was just a black man in a place he didn't belong, holding something that looked vaguely dangerous. Before we unravel how a simple birthday celebration turned into a constitutional crisis that would shake the police department to its core, I need you to understand exactly what was happening just 10 minutes prior. Because the difference between a peaceful afternoon and a life-altering event is often just one phone call made by one person who thinks they own the world. It was 1:30 p.m. The sun was high and bright, casting long, sharp shadows across the manicured lawns of Oak Creek. Marcus Thorne, 52 years old, was feeling good. He was wearing a faded Morehouse College t-shirt and cargo shorts, a rare break from the bespoke three-piece suits he wore to the courthouse every day. Today was special. It was his wife's 50th birthday. Elena was inside getting ready, and Marcus had taken it upon himself to transform the front porch into a gold and white spectacle before the guests arrived at 4:00 p.m. He was meticulous, a trait that served him well in closing arguments, and he was currently debating the structural integrity of a streamer archway when he heard the footsteps. They were heavy, purposeful footsteps crunching on the gravel of his driveway. Marcus didn't look up immediately. He assumed it was the caterer arriving early. "Excuse me. Hey, you. Stop what you're doing." The voice was young, nasal, and dripping with an unearned sense of authority. Marcus turned slowly. Standing at the edge of his property line was Kyle Vance. Kyle was 34, a newcomer to the neighborhood. He worked in high-frequency trading, drove a loud Porsche, and had introduced himself to the Homeowners Association board the day he moved in 3 months ago. He was wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki shorts, sunglasses perched on his head. He looked like every frat boy Marcus had ever cross-examined, just 10 years older and significantly more entitled. "Can I help you, Kyle?" Marcus asked, his voice a deep baritone that usually commanded silence in a courtroom. Kyle blinked, clearly surprised that the maintenance worker knew his name, but he recovered quickly, his face hardening into a sneer. "I don't know who hired you, but you need to take that trash down. This is a deed-restricted community. We have strict rules about signage and decorations. You can't just tack cheap garbage up on the facade." Marcus sighed, resting the staple gun against his thigh. He had dealt with Kyle's complaints before about the placement of trash cans about the height of the hedges. But this was different. Kyle wasn't speaking to him as a neighbor. He was speaking to him as a subordinate. "First of all, Kyle, good afternoon to you too," Marcus said, keeping his tone level. "Second, the HOA bylaws allow for temporary party decorations for up to 24 hours. I checked. And third, this is my house. I'm not hired help. I'm your neighbor. We've met 3 times. Kyle stepped onto the driveway, crossing the invisible line of property rights that he claimed to care so much about. He squinted at Marcus, then laughed. It was a cold, dismissive sound. "Right. The neighbor. Look, pal, I don't know what game you're playing or if the owners let you crash here while they're out of town, but I'm not having it. This looks like a circus. It brings down the property value. I want you to pack this up and get off the property before I call the actual owners." Marcus straightened his back. At 6'2", he towered over Kyle. I am the owner, Kyle. My name is on the deed. It's on the mailbox. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a party to set up. Please get off my driveway. Kyle's face turned a blotchy shade of red. He wasn't used to being told no. In his world of algorithms and instant trades, he commanded and the world obeyed. You're trespassing, Kyle spat out. And you're being aggressive. I'm giving you one chance to leave. Get off my property, Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave. Now. Kyle pulled his phone from his pocket. He held it up like a weapon, his thumb hovering over the screen. You picked the wrong guy to mess with, Kyle said. I know the law, I know my rights, and I'm not letting some squatter ruin the neighborhood aesthetic. Marcus turned his back on him and fired a staple into the wood column. Thwack. That sound, the sharp crack of the industrial stapler, was all the excuse Kyle needed. He dialed 911. And this is where the story shifts from a neighborhood dispute to a criminal act. Because when Kyle Vance spoke to the dispatcher, he didn't say he had a dispute over streamers. He decided to weaponize the police. 911, what is your emergency? I need police at 4200 Oak Creek Drive immediately, Kyle said, his voice rising in panicked falsetto that was entirely performative. There's a man here, he's trespassing on the property. He's belligerent, he's screaming at me. Marcus paused, looking over his shoulder. He hadn't raised his voice once. Is he armed? The dispatcher asked. Kyle looked at the staple gun in Marcus's hand. It was silver metallic and heavy. Yes, Kyle lied. He has a weapon. It looks like a gun. He's waving it around. I feel threatened. My life is in danger. Please send someone now. He's a large black male, aggressive behavior. Marcus heard the words. He froze. He knew exactly what those words meant. He had read hundreds of police reports. He knew the code words that turned a check the welfare call into a tactical response. Aggressive, weapon, threat to life. Kyle wasn't just calling the cops. He was painting a target on Marcus's back. You need to stop, Marcus said, turning fully around, his hands spreading open to show he wasn't a threat. You are filing a false police report. Do you understand the gravity of what you're doing? He's coming at me, Kyle screamed into the phone, backing away dramatically, though Marcus hadn't moved an inch. He's threatening me. Please hurry. Kyle hung up and looked at Marcus with a look of triumph that was chilling. Let's see how tough you are when the boys in blue show up, Kyle sneered. They don't like trespassers with guns. Marcus didn't panic. Panic gets you killed. Instead, his mind shifted gears. He ceased to be Marcus the husband or Marcus the neighbor. He became Mr. Thorne the prosecutor. He carefully placed the staple gun on the ground far away from his reach. He placed the roll of streamers on the porch railing. He walked to the center of his driveway away from the shadows and stood with his hands clearly visible, palms open. He knew the response time for a man with a gun call in this district. 3 minutes, maybe 4. He looked at Kyle. You have just destroyed your life, Marcus said calmly. You have no idea who I am, do you? I know exactly what you are, Kyle retorted, crossing his arms. You're a thug who broke into the wrong neighborhood. The sound of sirens cut through the air. Not one, but multiple. The wail grew louder, bouncing off the large brick facades of the colonial houses. Blue lights flashed against the oak trees. A cruiser screeched around the corner, followed closely by another. They jumped the curb tires, tearing up the perfectly manicured grass Marcus paid $400 a month to maintain. The doors flew open before the cars even fully stopped. Police! Show me your hands. Show me your hands. Officers Miller and Davis were young. Marcus recognized Miller from a suppression hearing 2 months ago. He was impulsive, prone to cutting corners. Davis was newer, a rookie who followed the lead of his senior partner. They didn't see a homeowner. They saw the description dispatch had given them: black male, armed, belligerent. Marcus stood still as a statue. His hands were raised to shoulder height. "I am the homeowner," he announced clearly. "My hands are empty. The object on the ground is a staple gun." "I said, get on the ground," Miller screamed, leveling his service weapon at Marcus. He was hiding behind the door of his cruiser, using it for cover. "Get down on your knees. Cross your ankles. Do it now, or I will shoot." "Officer," Marcus said, his voice steady, projecting so the neighbors now peering out of their windows could hear. "I am complying. I am moving slowly to my knees. I am unarmed." He lowered himself to the concrete. The gravel dug into his shins. It was humiliating to be a man of his stature kneeling in the dirt of his own home while his neighbor watched with a satisfied smirk. Kyle was standing by the mailbox, pointing. "That's him. That's the gun right there." He pointed at the stapler. Miller rushed forward, holstering his weapon but pulling out his taser. "Hands behind your back. Now." "I am moving my hands behind my back." Marcus narrated his every move. "I am not resisting." Miller grabbed Marcus's wrists and wrenched them together, applying the handcuffs with unnecessary force. The metal bit into the skin. Marcus winced but didn't cry out. He felt the officer's knee press into his lower back, pinning him to the driveway. "You got the weapon," Miller yelled to Davis. Davis kicked the staple gun away, then picked it up. It's a stapler, Miller." "Secure it anyway," Miller barked. He yanked Marcus up by the arms, dragging him toward the patrol car. Marcus stumbled but regained his footing. "Officer," Marcus said, staring Miller directly in the eyes. "You are making a mistake. I am the property owner. My identification is in my back right pocket. I suggest you check it immediately." "Shut up," Miller snapped. "You're being detained for brandishing a weapon and terroristic threats. We'll check your ID when we get to the station." "You have no probable cause for arrest," Marcus said, his voice turning icy. "And you have no reasonable suspicion to detain me once you have identified that the weapon is a piece of office supply equipment. Terry v. Ohio requires specific articulable facts. What are yours?" Miller paused. He wasn't used to suspects quoting Supreme Court cases. He shoved Marcus against the hood of the cruiser. The metal was hot from the engine. "You a lawyer?" Miller scoffed. "Doesn't matter. We got a witness saying you threatened to kill him." Kyle walked up, emboldened by the handcuffs. "He did." Kyle lied smoothly. "He pointed that thing right at my face. Said he was going to put a hole in me." Marcus looked at Kyle. "Officer, I want you to note the position of the security cameras on my eaves," Marcus said, nodding his head toward the roofline. "Everything is recorded, audio and video, and when you review it, you will see that this man is lying." Miller looked up at the cameras. A flicker of doubt crossed his face, but he was too deep in the adrenaline of the bust to back down now. He looked at Kyle. "You willing to sign a statement?" "Absolutely," Kyle said. "Then get in the car," Miller told Marcus. "I am not getting in that car," Marcus said. He didn't shout. He didn't struggle. He simply planted his feet. "You are currently violating my Fourth Amendment rights. You have failed to verify my residency despite my offer of identification. You are relying on the uncorroborated hearsay of a complainant who is visibly agitated while I have remained calm. Under United States v. Deffenbaugh, you have a duty to investigate exculpatory evidence readily available at the scene, namely my ID and my wife who is inside the house." Miller's face flushed. "I told you to shut up. You want to add resisting to the charges." "I am not resisting. I am informing you of the law, and since you seem determined to ignore it, I will give you one more piece of information." Reach into my back pocket, take out my wallet, open the badge case. Miller hesitated. Davis, the rookie, looked nervous. "Miller, maybe we should check." Davis whispered. Fine. Miller grunted. He reached into Marcus's back pocket and pulled out the slim leather wallet. He flipped it open. The color drained from Officer Miller's face instantly. It wasn't a driver's license. It was a gold shield. Below it, the ID card read, Chief Deputy District Attorney, Marcus Thorne, badge number 002. Miller stared at it. He looked at the photo, then at the man in handcuffs. He looked at the badge again. His throat moved as he swallowed hard. This wasn't just a lawyer. This was the man who signed off on officer-involved shooting investigations. This was the man who decided which cops got immunity and which ones got indicted. Read it out loud, Marcus commanded. Chief Deputy District Attorney, Miller stammered. And do you know who I am, Officer Miller? Marcus asked softly. I signed your commendation last year for the drug bust on 4th Street. I also signed the disciplinary review for Officer Henderson when he conducted an illegal search. I know the law better than you know your own mother's birthday. Now take these cuffs off me. Miller fumbled for his keys. His hands were shaking. The click of the handcuffs unlocking sounded like a gunshot in the quiet street. Marcus rubbed his wrists, looking at the red marks left behind. Sir, I didn't know. Miller started backing away. The call came in as a man with a gun. We were just following protocol. Your protocol is to assess the threat, Marcus said, adjusting his t-shirt. Not to blindside a homeowner based on a 911 call without visual confirmation of a weapon. You saw a staple gun and you still put me in cuffs. You ignored my statement of ownership. You ignored the lack of immediate threat. At that moment, a third police vehicle pulled up. It was an SUV. Sergeant Reynolds stepped out. He took one look in the scene, his officers looking like terrified children. Marcus Thorne rubbing his wrists, and Kyle Vance standing confused by the mailbox, and he knew exactly what had happened. Reynolds had worked with Marcus for 15 years. Mr. Thorne? Reynolds asked, walking over quickly. What on earth is going on here? Sergeant Reynolds? Marcus nodded. Your officers here were just about to arrest me for decorating my own house. Reynolds turned his gaze to Miller. The look was withering. Miller, explain to me why the chief deputy DA is in your custody. It was a mistake, Sarge. The neighbor, he said. Miller pointed a trembling finger at Kyle. All eyes turned to Kyle Vance. Kyle's arrogance had evaporated. He saw the badge. He saw the sergeant's deference. He saw the shift in the atmosphere. He realized with a sickening lurch of his stomach that the power dynamic had completely inverted. He started to back away toward his own lawn. I just made a mistake, Kyle said, his voice cracking. It looked like a gun. From my angle, it looked real. I was just trying to keep the neighborhood safe. Marcus walked over to the sergeant. Sergeant, I want to file a formal complaint against this man. He pointed at Kyle. False report of a crime. Georgia Code 161026. Misuse of 911. And I want him charged with swatting. He specifically told the dispatcher I was brandishing a firearm and was belligerent to induce a heightened police response. That is a felony. Reynolds nodded. We have the dispatch tapes, sir. If he said you had a gun and you clearly have a stapler, I want him arrested, Marcus said. Now. Kyle threw his hands up. Wait. You can't arrest me. I live here. It was a misunderstanding. I'm a vice president at Distinct Capital. You can't do this. Mr. Vance, Marcus said, stepping closer to the property line. You used the police as your personal bullying squad because you didn't like my streamers. You weaponized the state against a black man because you assumed I couldn't possibly belong here. You gambled my life on your prejudice, and now you're going to learn that the law applies to you too. Reynolds signaled to Miller and Davis. Cuff him. The officers, desperate to redeem themselves in the eyes of the district attorney, moved with speed. They grabbed Kyle. Hey, get your hands off me, Kyle shrieked. Do you know how much money I make? I'll sue you. I'll sue all of you. Turn around. Miller barked, enjoying this arrest much more than the last one. He spun Kyle around and clicked the handcuffs onto his wrists. "You have the right to remain silent." Davis began reciting the Miranda rights. "I'm not silent, I'm calling my lawyer," Kyle screamed as he was marched toward the patrol car where Marcus had just been. "Marcus, Mr. Thorne, please, let's just talk about this. I'm sorry. Marcus watched them shove Kyle into the back seat. The sight brought him no joy, only a grim sense of necessary correction. He looked at the neighbors who had gathered Mrs. Higgins from next door, the young couple from across the street. They were all filming with their phones. "He's going to lose that job at Distinct Capital by Monday morning," Reynolds murmured, standing next to Marcus. "Once that video hits the internet, corporate won't touch him." "Actions have consequences," Marcus said quietly. "He wanted a police response. He got one." Reynolds looked at Marcus's wrists again. "Sir, about my guys. I'll have them write up a full incident report. I'll handle the disciplinary—" "I want the Bodycam footage," Marcus interrupted. "Unedited by tonight. And I want a meeting with the chief on Monday. We need to talk about your protocol for unverified 911 calls. If I was anyone else, if I was a kid, if I didn't know the law—" Marcus let the sentence hang. "I understand," Reynolds said solemnly. "I'm truly sorry, Marcus. Happy birthday to Elena." "We'll see," Marcus said. The police cars drove away, taking a sobbing Kyle Vance to the county booking center. The silence returned to Oak Creek Drive. The birds started chirping again. Marcus stood alone in his driveway. He took a deep breath, trying to slow his heart rate. His hands were trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was fading. He looked down at the gold streamers still lying on the porch. The front door opened. Elena stepped out, looking beautiful in a white dress. She stopped when she saw Marcus's dusty knees and the red marks on his wrists. She saw the police cars turning the corner at the end of the block. "Marcus," she asked, her voice trembling. "What happened? I heard sirens." Marcus looked at his wife. He forced a smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. He picked up the staple gun. "Just handling a pest problem, honey," he said softly. "Nothing that's going to ruin your day. Come on, hold this ladder for me. We have a party to finish setting up." That evening, the party was perfect. The gold streamers shimmered in the twilight. The champagne flowed. Friends and family laughed and celebrated. But every time a car drove by, Marcus flinched. He couldn't help it. 2 days later, the video of Kyle Vance's arrest went viral. As Reynolds predicted, he was fired before he even made bail. The charges stuck. Marcus made sure a special prosecutor was brought in from another county to avoid a conflict of interest. But the evidence was overwhelming. Kyle Vance pleaded guilty to filing a false report to avoid jail time, ending up with probation, a massive fine, and a criminal record that would follow him forever. Marcus sued the police department for the civil rights violation. He won a $250,000 settlement. He didn't keep a dime. He used the money to start a legal defense fund for people in his city who were wrongfully detained but couldn't afford a lawyer. But here's the thing that keeps Marcus awake at night. He sits in his office looking at the framed photo of his family, and he thinks about the moment Officer Miller's finger was on the trigger. He thinks about what would have happened if he had reached for his phone instead of his ID. He thinks about what would have happened if he worked in construction instead of the DA's office. He would be dead. He survived because of his badge. But a badge shouldn't be the difference between life and death for a man standing in his own driveway. The system worked that day, but only because the man in the handcuffs was one of the architects of that system. And that is a terrifying reality. What do you think? Was the settlement enough? Should Officer Miller have been fired? Or was the retraining Marcus demanded sufficient? And most importantly, have you ever had the police called on you for simply existing in a space where someone thought you didn't belong? Let me know in the comments. This is a conversation we need to have. Stay safe out there, and remember, know your rights, because sometimes they are the only shield you have.